The stars above the observation planet glittered like frozen fire. Cadets from every corner of the galaxy had gathered here for a field trip, part of their first real training beyond the academy walls. Among them was a small human cadet named Elier, barely 15 but full of curiosity. The instructors had warned them again and again, there was a creature on this planet, massive, ancient, and dangerous. Its very existence was a secret in most textbooks. No one knew its name. No one approached it. And no one, the instructors insisted, should ever try. The other cadets, tall and sharp-eyed from distant worlds, whispered among themselves as their transport ship hovered over a vast, rocky plateau. Their alien voices were tense, almost afraid. Some had glowing scales that bristled in warning, others had multiple eyes that flicked toward every shadow. Every one of them kept their distance from the observation zone, where the creature was rumored to sleep. Elier, clutching his small pack, could feel the tension in the air. Something about it felt wrong. When the transport landed, the cadets stepped out slowly, their boots crunching on the strange, silvery soil. The plateau stretched farther than their eyes could see, broken by jagged rocks and thin clouds of mist. Elier paused at the edge of the group, his heart racing with excitement. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the tallest rocks, lay the creature no one had dared name. The instructors, a pair of stern humanoids, raised their hands. "Remember, cadets," one said, voice echoing across the plateau, "this creature is not like anything you have studied. It is ancient. It is unpredictable. Observe from a distance. Do not provoke. Do not approach." Most of the cadets obeyed immediately. They formed a loose circle, scanning the horizon through binoculars and sensors. But Elier's eyes were drawn to the shadows beyond the rocks, where a shape moved slowly. At first he thought it was a trick of the mist. But then he saw it, a giant, dragon-like form. Its scales shimmered in colors he had never seen, shifting between silver and deep violet, almost like the surface of the planet itself. Its eyes were closed, and it lay stretched across the plateau like a mountain that had taken breath. Even from this distance, Elier could feel its presence. It was enormous, easily 100 meters long, its wings folded carefully against its body. The air around it seemed heavier, charged, as if the planet itself bowed to the creature. The other cadets whispered in fear. "It's watching us," one hissed. "It can smell our fear." Elier did not feel fear. Instead he felt curiosity. The creature seemed calm, almost lonely. Its chest rose and fell slowly, and its tail lay still on the ground. He noticed patches on its scales where the color was duller, almost like scars, and he felt a pang in his chest. It wasn't dangerous, it was tired. He edged a few steps closer, careful to remain in the instructor's line of sight. He could hear the quiet panic in the alien cadets behind him, their multiple limbs shifting nervously. Elier's small hands clutched the straps of his pack. Inside was his lunch, a simple sandwich wrapped in cloth. He had thought about it that morning, about how strange this planet would be and how far away from home he was. Now, holding his lunch, he had an idea. The instructors' voices drifted in the background, reminding everyone to stay back. But Elier barely heard them. He knelt down slowly, placing a small portion of his sandwich on a flat rock a few meters ahead. His hands trembled, but not from fear. He was holding his breath, waiting. For a long moment nothing happened. The cadets behind him gasped silently, unsure whether to move or scream. Then a subtle shift. One of the giant creature's eyes opened, just a sliver at first, revealing an iris like molten gold. It blinked slowly and sniffed the air. Elier froze. The creature did not roar. It did not move aggressively. It simply looked at the food, then at him. The cadets whispered frantic questions, but Elier did not answer. He remained still, eyes wide. Slowly, the dragon-like creature leaned its massive head toward the rock, and with careful precision, it took the sandwich. Its jaws were enormous, but it moved gently, almost as if it understood the cadet was offering kindness. Elier's heart pounded, but he smiled faintly. It was alive, yes, but not the kind of danger the galaxy feared. He realized that no one had ever tried this. No one had ever approached the creature with care instead of weapons or machines. The cadets' fear slowly shifted to wonder. Their instruments had predicted attack patterns, defensive behavior, but they had never measured curiosity, patience, or the ability to recognize goodwill. The creature ate quietly, its massive head moving gracefully. For the first time, Elier noticed subtle details. Small spikes along its back, faintly glowing runes etched into its scales, and wings that stretched far wider than any ship he had seen. And then it looked back at him as if asking silently, "Why?" Elier shrugged, feeling the simplicity of his answer in his chest. "Because you look hungry," he whispered, though the sound barely carried across the plateau. The instructors finally moved closer, but even they were silent, watching. They had prepared the cadets for danger, for conflict, for disaster. But this was not what they expected. Something in the creature shifted, its tail curling slightly around the rock where the sandwich had lain. It seemed to accept him not as a threat but as a friend, or at least as someone harmless enough to notice. The other cadets stared, some wide-eyed, some frozen with disbelief. No protocol had ever accounted for this. No manual had ever suggested that a human child could bridge the gap between fear and understanding with something as simple as food. Elier slowly backed away, careful not to startle it. The creature remained still for a long moment, eyeing him, then finally closed its eyes and rested again as if satisfied. The cadets whispered, barely daring to breathe. They had come expecting a monster, and they had found something far stranger. An ancient being, enormous and powerful, touched not by dominance, but by the simplest act of human empathy. Elier stood alone on the plateau, a small figure in front of a giant. The other cadets stayed behind, their instruments recording every moment. Somewhere in his chest, Elier felt a quiet joy. He had approached what no one dared name. And he had not done it with courage in battle, but with kindness. For the first time, the galaxy might begin to see that humans did not always act like the others. They acted with thought. They acted with care. And sometimes, that was enough to reach even the largest, oldest, and loneliest of creatures. The stars above twinkled silently. Elier knew this was only the beginning. The wind on the plateau was cold but gentle, brushing across Elier's face as he stood a little distance from the rest of the cadets. The giant dragon-like creature had returned to its resting position, but its massive head occasionally lifted, scanning the surroundings. Elier's heart was still pounding from the first encounter, but he could not stop thinking about it. No one else dared approach, yet something inside him urged him to take another step. He noticed the other cadets gathering in small groups, whispering nervously. Their voices carried fear and awe in equal measure. Some had sensors out, trying to measure the creature's heart rate or detect energy fluctuations. Others kept their distance entirely, watching through scopes. They all looked at the creature as if it were a weapon waiting to strike. Elier, however, did not see danger. He saw loneliness. Slowly he knelt down again and reached into his pack. His lunch was simple, a small sandwich and a few pieces of fruit. He looked at the creature and wondered what it might like. The cadets behind him muttered warnings, but Elier ignored them. He knew they were thinking about rules, protocols, and possible risks. He was thinking about something else entirely: trust. He took a small piece of fruit and held it out, a few meters closer than before. The giant creature's eye opened once more, revealing that molten gold iris. It blinked slowly as if studying him. Elier's small hand shook, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. He was alone in a place where the galaxy had declared fear and avoidance the only safe path. The creature leaned its head slightly, sniffing the air. Elier froze. He remembered the instructor's warnings: do not provoke. But he did not feel that he was provoking. He felt that he was offering. Slowly, carefully, he set the fruit on a flat stone between them and stepped back a little. Time stretched. The other cadets whispered and pointed, their instruments beeping nervously. Some of them had never seen a human act this way. A few gasped, their eyes wide. The creature sniffed the fruit again, then gently touched it with the tip of its massive snout. Elier held his breath as it tasted the offering. Then something surprising happened. The creature did not eat it quickly, nor did it ignore it. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if testing the cadets' intentions. The cadets behind him exchanged shocked glances. Their sensors showed no threat signals, no aggressive energy. Only patience and curiosity. The massive dragon-like being was aware of him and it seemed interested. Elier knelt a little closer, careful not to cross any invisible line. He took out a piece of his sandwich and placed it next to the fruit. The creature sniffed again and then very carefully took the food into its mouth. Its teeth were massive, but it moved with precision, avoiding crushing it. Elier's eyes widened. He had never seen anything so enormous act so delicately. A low, vibrating sound came from deep in the creature's throat. It was not a roar, not a warning. It was something else. A sound that made Elier's chest feel warm. The other cadets were silent. Even the instructors seemed unsure how to react. This was not a display of power. This was an exchange, a recognition. Elier realized something important. No one had ever approached this creature with patience or kindness before. All the rules, the protocols, the fear, none of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was understanding. What mattered was small steps toward trust. And Elier, just a small human cadet, had taken the first step. He held out another piece of food, this time without thinking, and smiled faintly. The creature shifted its enormous wings slightly, its eyes following him. Its body was massive, but it was not moving to attack. It was watching, waiting, learning. Elier felt a thrill of connection unlike anything he had experienced before. The plateau seemed quiet now, except for the soft wind and the distant hum of the transport ship. Time felt slower, almost like the world had paused. Elier could see every detail of the creature. The ridges along its spine, the faint scars on its scales, the way its tail curled slightly, like a cat testing its patience. And in that moment he understood something the sensors could never measure. This creature could feel loneliness. And he had acknowledged it. A few cadets moved closer, but cautiously, their eyes wide. One of them whispered, "It's not attacking." Another said, "It's watching him." They were amazed. Elier did not care about their surprise. He was focused entirely on the moment, on the giant being before him, and on the realization that sometimes courage was not about weapons or training. Sometimes courage was simply about caring. The creature shifted again, lowering its head closer to the stone where Elier had placed the food. It was enormous, bigger than any ship Elier had seen, yet it moved with surprising gentleness. It took another piece of the sandwich, then paused, looking up at him directly. Its eye was large enough to see his entire face, yet it did not feel threatening. Elier felt a strange warmth, as if the creature understood that he meant no harm. For the first time he spoke aloud. "I just wanted to share," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not afraid of you." His voice trembled slightly, but the words were true. The creature tilted its head as if considering what he said. Then it lowered its massive jaw again, slowly chewing the food. Elier's heart pounded with joy and relief. The instructors moved a little closer, observing silently. They had prepared for danger, for chaos, for aggression. But this was something entirely new. The cadets behind Elier were frozen in awe. The creature's attention was entirely on him, and it made them reconsider what they had believed about humans. This small human, a single cadet, had done what centuries of galactic rules had failed to do: reach a connection with an ancient, massive being. Elier felt a quiet pride. He was just a boy, small and inexperienced, yet here he was, standing before a living legend. The dragon-like creature, enormous and majestic, had accepted his small gift. And in that moment he realized that sometimes, size and power did not matter. Understanding did. Patience did. And a small step, offered with kindness, could bridge even the widest gap. The creature finally lowered its head fully, resting again, but it remained alert. Its gaze lingered on Elier for a long time, and for the first time, he felt that it had acknowledged him. Not as a threat, not as an intruder, but as a being worth noticing. Elier stepped back slowly, careful not to startle it. He looked at the other cadets and smiled faintly. They were still staring, wide-eyed and whispering. But he knew something they did not yet understand. Sometimes the smallest steps toward something massive could change everything. Above, the stars shone cold and distant, but below, on the plateau, a small human had taken the first real step toward a connection no one else had dared to try. And the giant creature had noticed. The giant creature had returned to its resting position, but Elier stayed a few steps away, watching it carefully. The wind was soft, carrying the faint scent of the rocky plateau. Around him, the other cadets were whispering nervously. Some had their sensors out, trying to detect any danger. Others just stared, frozen in disbelief. No one could believe what was happening. The instructors, serious and tall, moved closer, their eyes wide. They had seen many strange beings, studied many dangerous species, but nothing like this. The creature was enormous, more massive than any record they had. Yet it was calm, gentle, and curious. It had accepted a simple gift from a human boy. And that was what puzzled everyone the most. Elier knelt again and carefully offered another piece of fruit. The creature leaned its head slightly, sniffing it, then took it slowly into its enormous mouth. Its massive jaws moved with care, almost like it knew how fragile the small food was. Elier smiled. The creature was not just eating, it was learning about him. The other cadets whispered among themselves. "Why does it respond to him?" one asked. "Why does it care about a human?" Sensors showed no fear signals, no aggression. The creature was calm, almost respectful. This was something no one had ever seen. The galaxy had studied humans for decades, but it had never studied this. Their curiosity, their empathy, their small, thoughtful acts that could reach even the largest creatures. Elier looked at the giant being and spoke softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just wanted to share." The creature blinked slowly, its molten gold eye focusing on him. For a moment the world seemed to pause. It was not listening with ears but with understanding. The cadets behind him watched in stunned silence. No one had ever imagined that humans could communicate like this, not with words or technology but with care. A soft vibration came from the creature's throat. It was not a roar. It was a sound of curiosity, of attention. It leaned closer, sniffing the ground where the food had been placed. Elia realized something important. The creature had lived alone for centuries, avoided by everyone who had studied it. No one had ever approached it with kindness. Everyone had feared it, tried to contain it, or used machines to study it. But the human boy had done something simple and new. The instructors exchanged glances. They had prepared for attack simulations, for danger, for chaos. They had never prepared for understanding. Elia's small actions had bypassed all their theories. He had done something the galaxy had never seen before. He had reached the heart of an ancient being. The cadets began to notice details they had missed. The creature's scales were not just armor, they were patterns like a map of its life. Some scales were dull, showing age or past injury. Its wings, folded against its massive body, had tiny tears at the edges, healed over time. It was enormous, powerful, and yet vulnerable in ways no one had measured. And a human boy had noticed. Elia took another step closer, still careful not to frighten it. He placed a small piece of sandwich on a nearby rock. The creature slowly leaned toward it, sniffing, then ate it gently. Elia realized the connection was growing. Each small act, each shared piece of food, was a step toward trust. And the creature responded in ways that no machine could record. The other cadets began to speak softly among themselves. It listens to him, one said. It understands him. Another whispered, humans, they do things differently. Sensors could not measure empathy. Machines could not detect patience. The galaxy had studied humans for their strength, their ability to adapt, their intelligence. But never this, their willingness to act with care even when surrounded by danger. Elia smiled faintly. He did not think about bravery in the usual way. He did not think about rules or reputation. He only thought about the creature and what it might need. It had not eaten in a long time and no one had offered it kindness. He had. That was all. The creature lifted its massive head and looked at him. Its eye followed his movements, watching carefully. Then it shifted slightly, lowering one massive wing as if to make space for him. Elia felt his chest tighten. The creature was not only accepting him, it was inviting him to continue. It was showing a small sign of trust. And in the galaxy, trust from such a being was rare, almost impossible. The instructors took notes silently, their expressions unreadable. They had studied ancient creatures, interstellar species, and dangerous guardians. But what they were witnessing now could not be explained by manuals or theories. A human boy, with no weapons, no machines, had done what the galaxy had failed to do for centuries. He had reached a living legend with empathy. Elia knelt again, this time placing the remaining fruit near the creature's claw. It sniffed the offering, then slowly nuzzled it with its enormous snout. Each motion was careful, deliberate, and calm. Elia realized the being was not just eating, it was learning about humans. It was experiencing something new, something it had never known. Small, thoughtful gestures from a species that approached life with curiosity rather than fear. The cadets whispered again, this time in wonder. Humans, one said quietly. They do things the galaxy never expected. Sensors recorded every heartbeat, every motion, every vibration, but even the machines could not measure understanding, connection, or trust. Only Eliar's actions had reached the creature's mind. He looked around at the other cadets. Their faces were a mixture of awe and disbelief. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, studied, and sometimes ignored. But here, on this plateau, a human had done what others could not. He had communicated without words, without force, without technology. He had simply offered care. And it had worked. Eliar felt a quiet joy. He had not intended to make history. He had only wanted to share. Yet the galaxy, unknowingly, was learning something important. Humans were not just clever or strong. They were patient. They were kind. And sometimes that was enough to reach beings the galaxy had long feared. The creature shifted its massive wings again, stretching slightly, but without aggression. Its eye remained on Eliar, and for the first time, it seemed calm in a way that no one had ever recorded. The boy had changed everything, not with power but with understanding. And as the stars above the plateau shone quietly, Eliar realized that this was only the beginning of what humans could teach the galaxy. No one had studied humans this way before. No one had expected a small, thoughtful step to mean so much. and the giant creature, ancient and enormous, had noticed. The wind on the plateau stirred the dust gently, carrying the faint smell of rocks and dry grass. The giant creature lay quietly, its enormous body stretched across the plateau. Elier stood a few meters away, his small hands still clutching his pack. He had watched the creature eat the food he offered and noticed how carefully it moved, how deliberate every gesture was. But now something had changed. For a long moment the creature remained still. Its eye, molten gold and calm, followed Elier's movements. Then, slowly, it lifted its massive head higher than before. Its wings twitched slightly, stretching in slow arcs. Elier froze. Every cadet on the plateau seemed to hold their breath. The instructors whispered softly among themselves, checking instruments and sensors. They had prepared for the creature to strike, to roar, or to attack in some unpredictable way. But it did nothing like that. Instead, the giant being shifted its massive weight, pushing itself up onto its front limbs. Its tail, long and thick, moved in a gentle arc behind it, not threatening, just adjusting to balance. Elier's eyes widened. He could hear the faint creak of its enormous joints as it rose. Every muscle, every scale, every claw seemed deliberate, careful, as if the creature knew how powerful it was and chose not to hurt anything. The other cadets stepped back instinctively. Some had their sensors raised, some whispered in fear, but none of them dared to move closer. Only Elier remained still, frozen with awe and curiosity. He realized the creature was not moving to attack. It was moving to show something else, something no one had expected. Slowly, the creature lowered its gaze to him. Its eye, large enough to cover his entire torso, studied him carefully. Then it made a soft, vibrating sound in its throat. It was not a growl, not a warning. It was recognition. The creature had accepted him, this small human cadet, as different from all the others. Elier felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had not expected this. He had only wanted to offer food and kindness. He had not thought it would lead to this. A giant being rising, powerful and massive, choosing to respond to him in a deliberate way. And yet, that is exactly what it had done. A sudden movement caught the cadet's attention. The plateau trembled lightly as the creature shifted. Its wings, folded against its massive back, began to stretch outward. They were wider than any ship Elier had ever seen. The tips brushed the ground lightly, creating small dust clouds. The creature's gaze remained on him, and Elier realized that it was inviting him to stay close, to continue their silent conversation. Then the unexpected happened. The ground beneath the plateau trembled more strongly. A small fissure had appeared in the rocks, sending dust and pebbles flying. Some cadets panicked, shouting warnings, but Elier stayed still. The creature reacted immediately. It lifted one enormous claw and planted it over the fissure, stabilizing the area. Its massive body shifted to shield the cadets from any danger. Elier's eyes widened in amazement. The giant being, whom the galaxy had feared for centuries, was protecting them. It moved with precision, not recklessly, aware of the smallest cadets and the fragile ground beneath them. The instructors and cadets stared in disbelief. No manual had ever predicted this. The creature's response was not defensive or aggressive, it was protective. Elier stepped slightly closer, keeping his hands visible. He felt a bond growing, a trust that words could never describe. The creature lowered its head slowly, its enormous eye watching him, then looked around the plateau again, ensuring that everyone was safe. Its movements were careful, deliberate, and astonishingly gentle, considering its size. The cadets whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. It's helping them, one said softly. Another added, it's protecting the cadets, because of him. They realized that the creature's focus was entirely on Elier. The small human had done something the galaxy could not predict. He had earned trust from a being larger and older than most civilizations. Elier held out a hand slightly as if to offer reassurance. The creature's eye followed it. Slowly, it lowered its massive head even further, closer to the ground, and emitted a soft, rumbling vibration. The sound was calm and steady, almost like a heartbeat. Elier understood it as an acknowledgement. The creature was saying, without words, that it recognized his intent, his care, and his presence. The instructors began to whisper among themselves, realizing the enormity of the situation. They had studied interstellar species for decades, but they had never observed this kind of interaction. No weapon, no machine, no experiment could have achieved what Elier had done. He had connected with a creature the galaxy feared using only patience, empathy, and small, thoughtful actions. The giant creature finally shifted its wings fully, standing taller now. Dust swirled around its enormous body, but it remained calm. It moved closer to the cadets but not threateningly. Its gaze stayed fixed on Elior. For the first time in centuries, the creature had made a deliberate choice. It had moved not to attack, not to defend itself against humans, but to respond to one human's trust and care. Elior felt a quiet pride and a growing understanding. The galaxy had always assumed that strength was power, that size meant danger, and that fear was the only response. But here, on this plateau, a small human boy had shown that courage could take the form of care, and kindness could influence even the largest, oldest beings. The wind died down, leaving the plateau in stillness. The creature lowered its massive body slightly, resting again, but its gaze remained on Elior. The cadets around them were silent, stunned. Some were beginning to understand that humans were not like other species. Their actions were not always predictable. Their empathy, their patience, their ability to act thoughtfully in unexpected ways, these were things the galaxy had never studied, never anticipated. Elior stepped back, careful not to startle the creature. He looked at it, and in that gaze he saw something profound, an acknowledgement of trust, an understanding that had taken centuries to earn. The giant being had chosen to move, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a being capable of recognizing connection. Above them, the stars shone cold and distant, but on the plateau, something warmer had emerged. A bond, fragile yet real, between a small human and a creature that had been alone for centuries. And as Elior looked around at the other cadets, he realized that the galaxy would never see this kind of interaction the same way again. For the first time, the plateau was not a place of fear. It was a place of trust, of understanding, and of beginnings. The giant had chosen to move again, and in doing so, it had changed everything. The sun was low over the plateau, painting the rocks and dust in soft orange light. The giant creature lay quietly, its massive body still but alive, eyes watching Elior. The cadets stood in awe, whispering among themselves. No one spoke loudly, afraid to break the fragile connection forming between the human boy and the ancient being. Elior stood a little apart, small in comparison to the dragon-like creature, yet somehow equal in the importance of the moment. 4 hours, the cadets had watched as the creature moved, stretched, and even protected them from small dangers. Sensors and instruments had recorded everything, but Elior knew that no machine could measure what had truly happened. The creature had not acted out of instinct or programming. It had acted because someone had cared, because a small human boy had reached out in the simplest way possible, offering food, patience, and trust. Instructors finally spoke, their voices low but filled with surprise. "This is unprecedented," one said. "We have never seen a species respond to a human this way. It has recognized him. It has accepted him." The cadets turned their heads, listening. They had studied humans for decades, learned about their intelligence, their adaptability, their bravery, but none of that had prepared them for this. No one had ever studied the quiet, simple power of human empathy. Elior knelt again and placed the last piece of his small lunch near the creature's claw. It sniffed it, then ate carefully. The movement was slow, deliberate, and gentle. Elior smiled faintly. He had never imagined this moment before, yet he felt a sense of calm, as if the world had paused to acknowledge what had happened. The creature had chosen him, recognized him, and for the first time, the galaxy could see what humans could offer beyond force or technology. The other cadets began to speak softly among themselves. "Humans, they do things we never considered," one whispered. Another added, "They reach places others cannot. Even this giant, this ancient being, it listens to them." They realized that the boy had achieved something that centuries of study and interstellar experience had failed to accomplish. Elior looked around at the plateau. The wind had died down, leaving a stillness that felt almost sacred. The creature shifted its massive wings slightly, as if to show it was aware of everyone present, yet it remained focused on him. Elior understood that this was a moment of trust, not just between him and the creature but between humans and the galaxy itself. News of the encounter spread quickly once the cadets returned to the academy. Scholars, instructors, and diplomats studied the recordings, trying to understand what had happened. The instruments had shown every detail of movement, breathing, and vibration. Yet the most important element, human empathy, could not be measured. The galaxy had never studied it, never considered that the simplest act of kindness could reach even the largest, most feared beings. Elior walked through the halls of the academy days later, his small figure unnoticed among taller cadets and instructors. Yet whispers followed him everywhere. "He did it," they said. "He reached the creature. No one else could." He did not understand fully what they meant. He had not intended to make history. He had only wanted to share his lunch, to reach out in the simplest way he knew. Back on the plateau, the creature had returned to its resting position, but it no longer seemed lonely. Its enormous wings were relaxed, its massive head rested lightly on the ground, and its eye followed the horizon with a calm awareness. Somewhere deep inside, it seemed to understand that humans were different. Not dangerous, not unpredictable, but capable of care that even the galaxy's oldest species had not considered. The other cadets began to approach the creature more carefully in the following days, inspired by Elior's actions. They offered food, soft words, and gentle gestures. Each time, the giant being responded, but always with its gaze lingering on the small human who had first bridged the gap. Elior watched quietly, knowing that this was not about praise or attention. It was about showing the galaxy something no one had understood before. Diplomats and scholars wrote reports. Humans are not like other species, one report read. They approach life with empathy and patience. They reach beings that others fear. Their actions have consequences beyond what science can measure. The story spread from academy to council chambers, from planet to planet, faster than any message or transmission. The galaxy had learned something new. Humans could connect in ways that power alone could never achieve. Elior returned to his daily routines, simple and quiet, but the lessons he had taught were already traveling across star systems. The creature had learned that humans could be trusted. The galaxy had learned that humans were more than clever or strong. They were thoughtful, patient, and capable of empathy. And for Elior, the moment was still personal, quiet, and meaningful. He had shared his lunch with a being no one dared approach, and it had changed everything. The stars above the plateau twinkled silently. Somewhere, far across the galaxy, species who had once feared humans began to reconsider. They watched transmissions, studied reports, and realized that the smallest gestures could reach the oldest and largest creatures. Elior had not fought a war. He had not led an army. He had only cared. And in doing so, he had taught the galaxy a lesson that traveled faster than light. Understanding, empathy, and trust were sometimes more powerful than technology, weapons, or fear. The giant creature lifted its head one last time that day, looking at the horizon, then slowly lowered it again, resting. Elior stood quietly, small in comparison but filled with quiet pride. He understood now that humans had a place in the galaxy not because of strength or cunning, but because of their ability to reach where others could not, to connect where others only feared, and to care where others turned away. And so, the galaxy remembered a small human cadet who shared his lunch, and a giant ancient creature who had finally found trust. Together, they had shown the universe that sometimes, the simplest acts carried the greatest power. And in the quiet of the plateau, under the soft glow of distant stars, humanity's lesson traveled faster than light, changing everything it touched.